August 8th, Bitcoin, and another clue appears that already hints at the start of that free fall. If yesterday we were talking about this very important doji that marked a high and a low in what is a channel or semi-channel that marked the beginning of the weekend, now this shooting star appears, as you see here, which marks for us what would be the shooting star simply without being accompanied by volume. It would simply be a very vague clue. On the other hand, when it is accompanied by volume, as is what we see now, I'm going to show you the volume. We will now enter into the deep study of the situation. But as you see, this volume already above 1.5, which I have always told you in these videos is when the strong hands appear. That is to say, those who manipulate the market at their whim is appearing together with this shooting star. And that is already marking for us the start of a free fall. The weekend begins. Many times, by the way, I'm Mikkel Vazquez. This is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. And after 15 years in professional trading, I would tell you that the only thing that works for sure to look for Bitcoin's price movement is to look for who is moving the price of Bitcoin. In other words, if there are institutions and strong hands that move the price at their whim, we have to look for those strategies, not look for indicators that are going to give us late signals of the movement or simply false signals. We look for what those who try to manipulate are doing. Very well, what I was telling you, we are seeing the shooting star accompanied by a very significant volume. It is marking the beginning of that free fall. Obviously, we're not going to see a red wick from here, from 65,000 down to 62,000, but it is another clue that adds to what we're already seeing for that move. As I was saying, the weekend begins, and the weekend has its own particular characteristics. In other words, the price of Bitcoin doesn't move exactly the same way during the week as it does on the weekend, and normally on the weekend we can see two circumstances. One, that it stays practically still in a range throughout the entire weekend until Sunday night. For example, right now it's near 65,000. We could see it like that all weekend long. Or, with low volume, we can see very large movements. In other words, if another volume of 1.5 or less were to come in now, we might not see the wick, not the candle I was telling you about, down to 62,000, but we could see a very aggressive move that wouldn't happen during the week with that same volume. Alright, with that situation established, now we are going to get into the deep analysis of the movement, where we are, both in the long term and on the weekly, which is the analysis that concerns us in these YouTube videos. And then the best circumstances for entering scalping or intraday. Very well. If what you're interested in is making money with trading, whether professionally or as a side job, I have designed a course where you will stop looking at indicators and start understanding what the market is actually doing, what the big players are actually doing, and you will be able to make money the way they do. Let's continue with the analysis. You already know that. I explained it in my course, but I always tell you in every time frame what the big players do, and their strategy is buy low, move the price quickly, and sell high. They always do it that way, which is why we see the 4 wick-off phases in all time frames: accumulation, markup, distribution, and markdown, with their own particularities, because not all movements are the same. But whenever we look at historical data, we can always find them. What we do to look for those phases, first in the long term, let's say, we are on the 4-hour chart. Each candle represents an hour. Now each candle represents a week, as we always do, and we look for those Wyckoff phases. We are in an accumulation phase. In the medium to long term, it's evident that we are going to look for a price above 80, maybe in the 90s, where the strong hands will carry out that distribution. Very good. That, for the weekly analysis, doesn't interest us right now. Those prices at 80 or 90 in the medium to long term, because what we want to see is how the price is going to react this weekend and what's coming next week. That accumulation, we've seen that rejection that we already intuited after the red candle, that it was going to go to 80. However, this green candle, with a bit of a wick at the bottom, makes us doubt whether it's going to attempt a high before looking for 60. We have that doubt. Before, we were clearer about it, but little by little, the bigger that green candle gets, the more doubts appear. That's why we're moving to the 4-hour chart now, and that's where we'll analyze that movement. It's important to keep in mind the movements, the larger time frames, because they often provide clues. In this case, the truth is that it hasn't given us a major clue, simply the clue that we can take into account from that time frame, so that it affects us in this analysis of 7 days, 10 days maximum, is to keep in mind support and resistance at 60,000 and 68,000. That's the only clue it gives us. It doesn't clarify for us if the movement's going to be short, that is, downwards or upwards. That is clarified more by the circumstances we are seeing on the 4-hour chart. That doji, now that shooting star, and now it really, come on, let's put it with the simple volume like we did before, and it confirms it for us. See? This very large appearance of volume with a very, very small candle spread. That is a movement between open and close that is practically nil, and a wick of rejection and breaking. It always appears at this level, see? It's a little above 65. Every time it gets close to 65, we see this reaction. Since it's in a downward movement, each time this arrival at 65 is less. That is to say, it passes it with less intensity. See? It makes the previous time it also reached a little bit more, but at that same level, and the time before that a little bit above. If we go back, we will see that this one was quite a bit above that level. What that gives us to understand with those clues that we will look for next week is the price below 64,000. Now it's at 65,000, very stagnant. And you know that retail sentiment is always contrary to what the movement of the Bitcoin price is going to do. When we were, for example, in this area of 60-something, it's a support zone, but it even dropped below 58,000, although we called it 60,000 just to say, because, you know, they aren't lines, but rather they are zones, and it was the 60,000 zone. At that moment, retail sentiment was to go down to 45,000, 50,000. Anything you read related to Bitcoin at that moment put the price at those levels. When that sentiment was intense enough, you see that the price did just the opposite. Now, we are entering a situation that isn't exactly the same, but the sentiment, we can really feel it in the air. And we see that here. There starts to be a sentiment of looking for highs, of looking for 80,000, or even the 90,000 that I was mentioning to you for the long term. However, the price is holding steady, and very subtle clues are appearing, but they are telling us to be careful because the price movement could go into that zone. Very well. We already have the long-term set. We have this analysis set. We're going to look for more clues over this weekend. I'm uploading another video tomorrow. I upload videos every day because these clues that appear are very subtle, but they tell us a lot about future movement. And that is precisely what we are looking for to do good trading. A good swing trade, a good weekly trade, or a good intraday or scalping. For intraday or scalping, where you can look for the best clues, obviously, while already taking into account what it's doing on the 4-hour chart, is to look for them on the 15-minute and 30-minute charts. Maybe 1 hour, but 15 and 30 are the best. Then each trader feels more comfortable with one chart or a combination of them. You see that the price entered the weekend. We see wicks on the upper part trying to push the price down a bit. However, it is very stagnant. Volume has also disappeared. You see here the movement from yesterday afternoon? There was indeed some intensity, even the volume spike I mentioned to you with the arrival at 65,000. However, now it disappears. If a volume spike similar to this one were to appear now, we could see a movement, a very aggressive wick. As I've told you other times, the market is efficient, and many times when those wicks appear with that volume in a few hours, or if there is no volume, it might take a day, but it returns to the same position it was in, and from there the strong hands continue executing their strategies. Because many times it's the funds, an isolated fund that places a position that does move the price in a very aggressive way, especially on the weekend, but then it comes back. Very well, we have those positions set for the week, 10 days, long term, and now we are looking, since in those time periods we are looking for the price to go down, The most logical thing is to also look for downward movements in scalping or intraday, that is, to go short. You're seeing, for example, those wicks, and now 10 candles later on the 15-minute chart, this slightly bearish movement appears, but I'm telling you, it's accompanied by practically zero volume, so it's not a 100% reliable movement. Very well, what you have to look for is when the chart picks up a little more, these same clues, these upper wicks, when they reach support or resistance zones on the 15 or 30-minute charts, which have their own particularities. In my course, I explain how to look for them, and once these three elements come together, you have a very good opportunity to enter. In other words, that significant volume comes in, as we saw here, that it reaches that zone. For example, 65 was very important, and upper wicks. You've seen that those three elements coincide, and you see the downward movement. This happens 90% of the time, and the 10% of the time that it doesn't happen is because these three elements don't coincide in a very powerful way. There are times when we are looking for them, and we imagine one of these elements when in reality it isn't there. It's better to wait. The chart will always be there. There will always be movement. Even if we see it stopped right now, the price is going to move. It's going to move a lot, and you just have to wait. I have a VIP Telegram group where I post the 2 trades I make every day, and it's a closed group because we practically all know each other, and I like that atmosphere of camaraderie, so to speak, and a helping out. It's 100 people. All 100 spots are already filled. However, those of you who sign up at mexc.com and make your first deposit, you will have access to this group, and also with 1 month free. I'm Michael Vasquez. This is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. I really appreciate you watching this video, and as I always tell you, this is not financial advice, but rather I am sharing my experience with you after more than 15 years in professional trading. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video. We're going to wait for those sharp moves that might appear with volume this weekend. Or otherwise, we'll see how the price starts giving clues that confirm the previous ones. Because you see that each clue adds to the previous one, and we are heading in the right direction. See you later.